Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Inspiral's 100 Diverse Stories, where we talk to women who've built businesses on their own terms. Our guest today is another woman just like that. Her name is Madhunika Raghavan. She is the founder and managing partner of Envision Health Partners, a company that provides full service market research, helping pharmaceutical and biotech companies prepare for a successful product launch. Madhunika is a mompreneur who started this company 6 years ago. She is also very involved in her community, contributes to some exceptional nonprofits through her work, whether with Envision Health Partners or individually as well. And honestly, just has a really interesting story to tell. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from her. Thank you so much, Madhunika, for joining us today.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Noreen.
Absolutely. Well, let's start from the very beginning. How did this business idea find you?
Yeah, the great question. I think I've always had this desire to be creative. I've always been a methods agnostic researcher. I love combining, qualitative research, quantitative research, competitive intelligence, social media listening, whatever it takes to answer the business problem. And, companies that I worked at, I felt limited, sometimes in being able to do that because I could only sell what my company was proficient in doing. I couldn't really go out of the network to find innovative partners if I needed to. I always had to sell what I had to sell, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I felt sometimes very limited that I just couldn't go out and source whatever it is that I needed to answer that business question. So I think that was kind of a driving force for me to say, okay, if I wanted to do this my way, how would I do it? And that was the genesis for saying, okay, maybe I need to start my own company so then I'm free to find the kinds of partners I need to bring all these methodologies together as it makes sense to answer the business question. So that's kind of, how this started. And then it just ballooned into sort of opening up my own research-based consulting company.
I love that. And kudos to you for doing that. I love how you said that it gives you, a lot of people think about business as financial freedom, which is true, but it's not just that, right? It's also freedom to make your own decisions to some point and not have like work come to you and say, execute this. You can decide what you execute on. So I think that was very well said.
It truly, Nareen, that's a luxury that I am grateful to have. That this was not a financial play and it was more of a creative play. So I definitely recognize that, that was a significant advantage I had in starting the business for sure.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Having a business idea is one thing. A lot of the women that I talk to, what they typically struggle with is how do they then start actioning on that business idea? What was it like for you to take that first step? Are there some tips that you would want to share with our listeners of how can you hold yourself accountable, actually bringing that idea to reality?
Yeah, I have to say in my case, it felt a lot simpler than it might be in other situations. Again, to your point earlier, I did not have that financial pressure. I had a very supportive, spouse who felt that if that's something I wanted to try, then, I was able to, quit my job and decide that this is what I was going to pursue in the next, say, 6 months or so and give it a shot. So I had that financial freedom. But then, that said, actually starting a business is not difficult. It's quite easy to set up a business in Connecticut. And so I might have spent half a day looking up the Connecticut business websites on how to, incorporate your own company. And that was it. You fill out a few forms, you go to the bank, you've got to get a lot of bank stuff done. But it's really not that hard to get the company set up from a logistical standpoint, So once I had the idea and I made the decision that I wanted to start the business, the logistics of it were not that actually hard to overcome. So hopefully that's good news for people out there, looking to start a business. The paperwork sounds daunting, but when you actually get to it, it's really not. And hopefully you're living in a state where, it's interesting to me. I can call, the Department of Revenue Services at Connecticut, and I can get a live person who actually answers my questions, and I can get my questions solved, my problems solved. So hopefully, if you're living in a state like that, take advantage of it because they are really trying to make it easy for entrepreneurs to start a business.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so true. I think sometimes as entrepreneurs or aspiring founders, we overcomplicate what it
Yes,
means to start a business. It just feels so daunting, right? Oh my God, I need to have a new bank account, or I need to like figure out all the admin. But when you break it down, it's
yes,
really not that hard getting from 0 to 0.1 and not jumping right.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Um, I want to ask you a little bit about how did you figure out what kind of solution to offer to your customers and who your target customers were? Were there like some introductory interviews that you did? How did you arrive at that process of deciding this is the solution that I'm going to put out there?
Okay. So again, maybe my situation is a little unique because I have been in research-based consulting for over 20 years. I stopped counting after 20. And a majority of it has been in the pharmaceutical and healthcare space. So I am very comfortable with what I do. I have done it for a long time. I do consider myself an expert in this field, and I have seen it both from a client side as well as a supplier side, right? So I worked in market research departments at major pharmaceutical companies. And I've also worked on the consulting side of it where I delivered market research services to these companies. So I'm very comfortable with the buying of market research services as well as the selling of market research services. And over the last 20 odd years, I mean, I have built strong relationships, in this industry, both on the client side at pharma companies as well as on the supplier side. So in starting this business was not that difficult from that standpoint because I have a lot of experience in the space. I know a lot of people that I can tap in to be partners with me in delivering to a pharma company. I know a lot of people in pharma who'd be willing to, trust me with their business problem and work with me to craft a solution. So from that standpoint, it was not that difficult to sort of reach out and get a first customer going. And then from the execution side, I have a very networked model. So we are a small core team of very senior people that sort of have oversight into every aspect of a program that we're delivering to a pharma company. But the way we execute it is with excellent partners. And again, these are relationships I've built for over a long time. So for example, in a market research study, the sample comes from a recruitment company. So we buy samples from outside, and then we have moderators who conduct these interviews. We're doing 30 interviews or 50 interviews for a project. So we have people that I can tap into who will run these interviews. So then our job really becomes synthesis, analysis, drawing the insights and delivering those recommendations to pharma. So again, that's the aspect of the business that we're really, really good at. And so, putting all of this together just felt much more organic for me than in a really good way.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, a relationship building is such a key part of a
Yeah.
service business like this. Do you have any tips for women who are going into service businesses, whether it's a consulting service like yours or other types of service businesses, on how to find and maintain these relationships? Because obviously it's a difficult line to thread as well. Like how do you go about looking for the right people, and how do you then make sure that these relationships are nurtured over time? Were there some actions that you put into place to help with that?
Yeah. So how you find your customer, I think, would vary, right, by the type of business that you're in. So I'm in a B2B environment, so that's a little different than being in a B2C, a more of a retail environment, right? So we're a business to business operation. So I think the customer acquisition, could look quite different depending on which industry you're in. But I think that the tenets of keeping a customer are universal, regardless of the channel here. And I think that's super important. I always tell myself and I always tell the team that we're only as good as the last project we deliver, you know? So I think the best way to retain customers is to go above and beyond and to delight them. And that is true in a retail environment, and that's true in a business environment. So, asking the right questions, really trying to understand that business question the customer is trying to solve for, and being very thoughtful about how you craft your solutions to them and then delivering, right? So you can have great ideas. You can say, oh, I can do this and I can do that, and I know how to solve your problem. But if you don't actually pull that through, if the data is not flawless, if the interviews are not well done, if you didn't have a thoughtful moderator doing these interviews, then, then you've sort of lost sight of the goal here, right? So the goal is not just to bring an answer back to the customer. The goal is to make them, or to inspire them to think about, what do I do with this information? So, a lot of people in consulting talk about, you want to understand the what, from the data, like what is happening in the market right now. You want to do some interviews with customers to understand why this is happening now, right? But when I bring it back to my client, I have to address the question of, now what? Now what do I do with this insight? You've told me what the pain point is. You've articulated what the unmet need is, but what do I need to do to solve for that? So you always have to think one step ahead of what the customer is asking you. So the customer came to me and said, I want to understand pain points and I want to understand unmet needs. But that's not the real question, right? Because a customer is trying to actually solve for that. So that's super important. I think you have to think a little bit ahead of the customer. And then that's when you get into their mindset, you get into their culture, and they appreciate the value you bring. And that's what locks you in. That's what brings them back to you the second time. So I think that kind of thing is universal. And so I would always encourage anyone, women entrepreneurs, any kind of entrepreneur, this applies to everybody across the board, is to always try to stay one step ahead of your customer and try to think about, what is your customer going to do with what you give them? I think that has been, I would say, the secret to our success and the secret to our repeat business.
Yeah. No, and that's such an important takeaway, I feel, for people listening today. Stay a step ahead of your customer. Because I think you said it really beautifully. Customers don't always know the extent of what they want or what they want. So it's important to have that perspective of what could be helpful to them, whether it's from your past experiences or even from talking to partners around you and observing what might be most helpful to them. So that was really helpful. Thank you. My next question to you is about building relationships internally within your company. How did you go about making your first hire, and how has the team grown since then?
Oh, yeah. So again, like I said, I'm very focused on the quality of delivery, right? Research execution and research delivery. Because you can't have good insights if the underlying data is flawed, right? Or it's not good enough. So the first hire we made was to bring in an operations person. So somebody with deep experience with understanding how to, manage the data within the organization, how to clean the data, how to process the data, and how to put the data in a format that then enables analyses, right? So in our business, we create data tables that look at all the data from multiple dimensions, so that we're able to do different kinds of analyses, subgroup analyses. So there's lots of detailed parsing of the data that needs to happen. So you really need to have somebody in place that understands the importance of data hygiene and cleaning the data and processing it correctly, so that we are then able to pick it up and analyze it. So that was a key hire we made. She's been with us for over 4 years.
And when you were deciding for someone to join your team, what kind of values were you looking for?
Yeah, that's another great question, because I really do think at the end of the day, it is about the collective value, and that comes through so clearly to a client, So it was very important. It's very important to me that people on the team, we are all sort of feel like we're rowing in the same direction. We have to row in the same direction. There's just one direction, which is, making sure that we are meeting or exceeding a client's expectations. That's the baseline. That is the foundation of everything we do. So if you sort of unpack that and work backwards into research execution, then that mindset has to be all the way from the first call with the client when we're talking about a business problem to that final report delivery. So I'll give you an example. So if I get a request for a proposal, so a client calls me and says, hey, we'd like to engage you guys, for this type of a project. at that point, we take that call. We don't just take the RFP. It usually comes in a Word document. They just email it out. We don't just take the RFP and come up with a proposal. No, we set up a call with the client and we talk about it. So we try to deeply understand what it is that they want and why are they asking for the kinds of things they're asking for? What are they going to do with the results of this research? So because even at that step, right, we're always thinking about, okay, how can we make sure we haven't missed anything from a customer's perspective, that we have appropriately challenged that customer to think about how the potential use, like, are they getting the best bang for their buck? Like, are they getting the best return on this investment? So sometimes I'll see an RFP and I will ask the client, why haven't you thought about this kind of a stakeholder? Or would you want us to consider including this type of stakeholder? Because we think that could provide an interesting, layer of insight to what you're trying to do. So right from the get-go, there's this back and forth, the positive tension to make sure that we're truly understanding what the client wants to do. Then that translates into program design, right? And this is where the team gets together and we really sort of collaborate on, okay, what's the right approach? What methodologies do we need to bring to the mix? What kind of partners do we need to bring to the mix to deliver a good solution? And this is where we'll duke it out. Like, if somebody has an idea and, somebody disagrees, we really make sure that everyone's voice is heard, because again, it's all about making sure that customer need is being met. And so there's no ego in this process. There's no personal ego in this process. And we're free to argue with each other, debate, ideas and solutions. And we do that. We sit around the virtual table and we talk through options. We are discussing sample size. We're discussing design, research design. We're discussing, what are the elements of what we want to learn, in this program. So again, we go through this process at every stage because we're always trying to make sure that, we believe that 2 heads are better than 1 and 4 heads are better than 2. And the more ideas we can get on the table, the better shot we have at really thinking more broadly and holistically about a program. And then all of us are bought into pulling it through because, everyone's idea is on the table. And then we're all able to work together to say, okay, we need to pull this project through. And yeah, same thing happens when we're in analyses and reporting. We're always trying to say, okay, have we analyzed this, from every possible angle? And could we be missing something,
Yeah. And throughout the process, it's almost like the customer is at the center of it. That person was constantly in the room looking at you and you're like, am I doing right by this person? I love that.
Yep.
Yeah. My next question for you, Madhunika, is about managing entrepreneurship. So when you're an entrepreneur, you're playing so many roles, right? You're a leader, you're also a founder, a creative yourself because you've started the business, an expert. You're also a mom, and there are many other roles that you play in life as well. How do you keep yourself motivated on a day-to-day basis to take this business to greater heights, and especially in difficult times?
Yeah, I know. I truly every time I do these interviews, I realize how fortunate I am because, people are always trying to find the balance between, what they want to do and what they perhaps need to do, right? But I've been fortunate in that I just absolutely love this business. I'm a career market researcher. I truly love what I do. So this is my passion. This is my hobby. And so it doesn't feel like work, most of the time. So and I think I also get so much satisfaction from the fact that, clients come to me and usually, the clients who reach out to us have a really burning business problem, or it's a very strategic, visible engagement that could sort of make or break them personally in the company. So it's a high stakes situation typically. They don't really come to us for like bread and butter type of market research. It tends to be very strategic and high profile work. So I get a lot of satisfaction, in sort of brainstorming that situation, sharing my experience and perspective, and then putting together a program that works for them. So it's very motivating to me. So it's not hard at all to run the business. And again, when it comes to the other aspects of it, right? Like managing, balancing family and balancing work, I've always said that I don't understand this work-life balance thing, because I don't think there's a balance. Like I think you're just always trying to do everything all at once, right? So when I think about the family aspect of it, again, I've been fortunate that I have a very supportive spouse, which makes all the difference in the world, right? And he's been wonderful in terms of like supporting me from a family standpoint, managing the kids, managing social priorities and all of that. So we, between us, have managed to sort of play yin and yang and just manage, work and life situations. So it's something we negotiate on a daily basis. But then again, even in this, there's a North Star, right? The North Star is that I'm doing what I'm doing for the family too. Yeah. It's not just, I'm not just, making money for myself or, trying to make sure that my employees are taken care of. At the end of the day, I'm doing this for our family as well. So both my husband and I have that same mindset that no matter where we're working, no matter what we're doing, that it's a collective enterprise. And so when it's a collective enterprise, that just becomes one other facet to manage. So it's like, you're managing HR, you're managing payroll, you're managing security issues, you're managing family. It all sort of comes together organically because, again, you have to have that view of what are you driving towards. And if there's unity in that goal, then I think everything just falls into place.
Yeah. No, that's so true. I always tell my husband as well, we're like co-founders of this family. As long as we're rowing in the same direction, as you mentioned before, it's all good, and we'll manage to make it work somehow. Sometimes someone needs to give a bit more, sometimes the other person gives a bit more, but it's always like a back and forth, right? As long as there is that understanding, it can work.
I mean, we do it with our colleagues at work. We do it with our clients, right? Like I will throw a price out to a client and they're like, listen, I would love to do this, but this is not fitting my budget. Can you do something about it? I'll come back with a revised number, right? There's compromise in every aspect, and the family is no different. So you're either negotiating with your clients, or you're negotiating with your employees, or you're negotiating with your family. So it's sort of it's a three-legged stool, and I think everybody has to find that balance and figure out how they want to juggle this. But so to me, it doesn't feel like a work-life balance. It just feels like you got to balance a lot of things, if you're running a business, or frankly, if you're working at all. I don't think it's any different for an entrepreneur versus somebody who goes to an office.
Yeah, no, that's so true, so true. My last question for you is one that we ask all women on this podcast. If you were to give one advice to women who want to start businesses on their own terms, just as you've done, what would that be?
Because I think you want to be very clear on why you are starting the business. I feel very strongly that having that North Star view, and being very clear on what is it that you want to do. Why are you doing what you're doing? I think is very important to understand. And I think once that crystallizes, everything becomes very clear from there, like how to do it, or what you're going to need to do it, or who do you need to tap to do it? Like what resources do you need to reach out to? I think all of that becomes clear, but none of that is clear if you don't have a true understanding of like why you're doing what you're doing. Like, are you starting the business to make money? Are you starting the business as a creative outlet? Are you starting the business because, I don't know, whatever that third reason might be. I think once you're clear on that, then I think you can plan for that. Because I think if you start a business to make money, your mindset is very different from somebody who's starting a business that is more of a creative outlet for them. So the way you think about, your strategy, your investment, your resource planning, all of that is incredibly different. So for me, the core always is, do you understand why you are starting the business? And if you do, so that would be the one piece of advice is to really reflect and be very clear on that, because that can have some big implications.
So well said. Thank you so much, Madhunika. This has been an amazing time talking to you about your story. I'm sure that people listening to this learned a lot today.
Thank you, Noreen. My pleasure.